Hello and welcome to r/Am I the Bad Guy? Our first dilemma comes from user AITA, Throw It. I, 39 male, am a single father to 4 kids. I am deaf. 3 of my kids are deaf. My 11-year-old daughter is hard of hearing, but wears a hearing aid, and with it, she is almost completely hearing. She goes to a hearing school, whereas my other 3 go to a deaf school. Also, lockdown restrictions have been lifted where I live. My 11-year-old just turned 11 a week ago, and she wanted to have 2 of her friends over for a slumber party. I said yes. I already knew one of the girls' mums she had invited, but I hadn't met the other one. I'll call her Callie. My daughter gave me Callie's mum's number, and I messaged her and just invited her over, set a date, time, etc. She seemed pretty chill, and I never really thought to mention that I'm deaf. Like when I think of myself being deaf, obviously it isn't the first thing that comes to mind. She arranged to drop her daughter off around noon. When she came to drop her off, I went to get the door and she started saying something to me. I then signed, "Sorry, I'm deaf, I can't hear you." She looked at me shocked and then pulled out her phone and started to text me. We had an argument over text while we stood right next to each other. I had said that I was going to drive the girls to get some fast food. She, without asking, said, "But you can't even drive." I replied, "I've been driving since I was 14, never once had an accident, and only had 3 speeding tickets in my life." She then replied, "What about parking tickets?" I then said, "This isn't an interrogation. Plus, aren't I just taking them through the drive-thru?" She said some other things about how she doesn't feel safe leaving her daughter here because of the language barrier, although I wouldn't speak to them much anyway and my daughter can interpret just fine. I said, "Would you feel the same way about someone whose parents only spoke Spanish?" Any language really would work, that was just what came to mind first. She replied that that's totally different. I don't see how though. Then I just said, "I'm not going to beg you to let your kids sleep over. If you don't want her to, then take her." She got really offended by that, but then she said she would let her stay, and then she left. Then she proceeded to call and text Callie every 2 seconds. Callie turned her phone to silent while they watched a movie. Then I started getting tons of messages calling me a sick creep, and saying she was going to call 911 because her daughter didn't answer her phone for 20 minutes. I replied she had just turned off her phone and there was no reason to be alarmed. A few minutes later she came to my house, didn't even knock on the door, just opened it and yelled to her daughter that they were leaving. Her daughter starts to cry because they've been having a good time, but she kept saying, "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" My daughter and her other friend told me that later. Now I feel like the bad guy, and I could have avoided the situation if I had just told her mother earlier. So, am I the butthole? Okay, what I'm going to say here is definitely you are not the bad guy. You're not a bad guy, you're not a butthole. This other woman, this mother, is 100% the bad guy, 100% the butthole. This woman is horrible. The way she's acting, terrible. However, I do think you should have probably told in advance that you were deaf. I mean, I understand that some people might have some concerns. Maybe some people think, okay, you shouldn't have to say that. That's just my opinion. I think you should have probably let her know beforehand. But I don't think it's a big deal whether you did or not. I don't think you're a bad person just because you didn't tell her. And I also don't think you're a shining angel because you would have told her. I think it's just, personally, I think it's something that would be good to know prior to taking your kid over. I think it's just a piece of information that's handy to know. I don't think it's a necessary piece of information, however. And so for that reason, I do not think you're the bad guy, but the mother's reaction here was horrible, especially after the child wasn't answering the phone for 20 minutes, and then she starts calling you a creep, and then she comes in. That was completely atrocious behaviour, and that cannot be condoned. Our next dilemma comes from my specific post-alt. I live with my 15-year-old son, 7-year-old daughter, 16-year-old daughter, and husband. With that alone, it's a little crowded, but everyone has their own bedroom and bathroom. My son and eldest daughter are very close. They still fight, but I wouldn't say as much as most siblings do. But whenever he wants to talk to her, he just bursts through the door. If the door is locked, he just hits it with his shoulder until she opens it, while at the same time damaging the house. Whenever she asks him to stop, he ignores it and only stops for a day when we tell him to stop. He always talks about his privacy and the importance of it, but disregards others. Last week though, he caught her changing. She was very angry and upset and came to tell us about it. We sat down with her son and told him that if he can't respect other people's privacy, then he can't have his own. Then we took his bedroom door. He still has his bathroom door. My husband doesn't necessarily think I'm a bad guy, but he thinks that's just our son. He thinks we should have instead helped her prank him. He's been begging for the door back for 3 days now, and I plan to put it back at the end of the week. Am I the butthole? Edit. This isn't the first time he has busted in on her changing. He doesn't target times he should be changing either, so I assume he isn't looking to see her naked. Edit 2. The walking in started about COVID and the banging started around this month. There were punishments before this that included grounding and allowance loss. Everyone in the house already has a lock. Okay, here, this is a tough one. I actually kind of think that everyone sucks here. I think everyone's kind of a little bit bad here. I mean, well, obviously we're just talking about the mother and the son. I don't think the dad's necessarily bad. I don't think the sister's bad at all either. I think it's mainly just the mother and the son. I think they both kind of suck here. For one, the son definitely needs to learn to respect privacy. He needs to learn that you can't just go barging onto other people's rooms, okay? He needs to learn that. But I think taking his door away, I think that's maybe a little bit of a step too far. Definitely a bit of a step too far. I don't think you can punish someone for breaking a rule by basically breaking that rule yourself. I've always been very much against the idea of murder the murderers. I don't think that it's a very good idea to punish someone by doing that exact same thing back to them. I think it kind of makes you look like a bit of a hypocrite. You are now intruding on your son's privacy for intruding on your daughter's privacy, and, you know, there are definitely punishments that can be made here. He should be punished. It should be said to him that you can't do this. But I think the punishment you have decided on here is maybe a bit too much. Plus, as you see in one of your edits, everyone in the house already has a lock for their doors. So maybe what you need to be doing is tell your daughter, start locking your door, especially if you're getting changed. And maybe that'll solve all your issues. From Penalty Particular. This feels ridiculous to me, but my daughter is 24 years old. As a child, she collected these stuffed animals and kept them on a shelf in pristine condition with the tags on. She never played with them or used them and rarely even touched them, but she would get really angry if anyone else ever tried to play with them. Now that she's older, it's been several years since she's handled them. She's no longer living here, but works out of state after graduating college. Her collection is still in her room at my home. A few weeks ago, I was babysitting my niece overnight. She's 4. She stayed in my daughter's bedroom and asked if she could sleep with a few of the stuffed animals. I figured my daughter likely won't be back anytime soon and probably doesn't care anymore, so I removed the tags off a couple of animals, choking hazard, and let her sleep with them. She did get a little drool on them, which I wiped the next day. A few days later, I zoomed with my daughter and let her know my niece used a few of her toys. She seemed upset but didn't say anything until I mentioned I took the tags off 3 of them. She then completely exploded, telling me that it was vandalism and I was out of line for removing tags of toys that didn't belong to me, even though she kept them in my house. I told her she, an adult, doesn't need toys anymore, and she told me it was disrespectful of me to damage her possessions that I knew were really valuable to her. Then she also told me that her collection, unadulterated, would have been worth thousands, which I didn't know. I feel like she should have told me this, but she says that I should have just known not to mess with her prized collection. She sent me links to the ones that had the tags removed, and they're extremely expensive now, but she asked me to replace them. I refused. It's been a few weeks, but she continues not to talk to me. My husband says maybe we should consider just replacing them, but I think she's being kind of ridiculous. She never came back for them. Am I the bad guy for removing tags on my daughter's toys? I think, for me, this is quite an easy answer, and it's that, yeah, you are the bad guy for this. I don't think it matters what these items were. It doesn't matter if they're toys. It doesn't matter if they're books. It doesn't matter what it is. The fact of the matter is, these were your daughter's prized collection. Your daughter had all of these things in mint condition. She collected them for a very long time. And it doesn't matter what these specific things are, whether they're toys or not, whether you think she's too old for them or not. They belong to her. And by doing what you did, you have vandalized her property. You have taken her property and reduced the value, not just monetary value, but also the value it has to her. Just because the collection is in your home does not mean you suddenly have the right to do what you want with those things. I think your husband is right, and you should replace these toys. And our final dilemma today is from Throwaway Because C. So, I, 14 female, have been going to school in person since August. I'm a high school freshman and one of my classes is world history. Yesterday we started on the Holocaust. Before we started the unit, he explained to us that he's Jewish and his great-grandpa was a victim of the Holocaust and that he might get a bit emotional while teaching. My teacher was explaining to us Nazi standards, and we decided to use me as an example. I'm a very pale, blue-eyed, blonde girl, but I have Jewish ancestors. I'm not Jewish because I'm atheist, but it's still my blood and my family that had to suffer. Which I guess he didn't know. He looked at me and said, "OP, the Nazis would have loved you." Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if you had Nazi blood in you. I was effing appalled. I knew this teacher didn't like me, but he crossed the line when he compared me to an effing Nazi. I'm not going to lie, I lost my crap. I got up and walked out the door and called my mum to pick me up. No, I'm not supposed to just leave, but I did it anyway. I told my mum what happened and she called the school and raised hell. She's friends with the principal and he assured her that he would either be reprimanded or released from his position. I think he's getting what he deserves. But my friend Mia, who actually really likes him, called me an overdramatic biatch and that I just ruined someone's livelihood, which made me feel really guilty. Am I the bad guy? I forgot to mention the way he said it. He didn't say it like a teacher making a connection or something to explain better. He said it aggressively and was pretty snarky about it, which is one of the reasons I walked out. I think you're definitely not the bad guy here. I think definitely your friend could be right. Maybe you're overreacting. I don't know. I think it's one of those situations where you'd maybe have had to be there to experience sort of the energy in the room and the way it was being said and all that sort of thing. From what you've said here in your post, you're definitely not the bad guy. That teacher was in the wrong 100%. However, maybe you did overreact slightly. But again, I can't really say. This could just be a thing that comes down to how upset someone gets by something like this. Someone else could have had it said to them in the exact same way, and maybe they wouldn't have been so upset about it. Regardless, the teacher was in the wrong, not you. And so that was r/am I the bad guy. Make sure to leave a like on this video if you liked it, and also make sure to subscribe if you're new here, and turn on that notification bell. That way you never miss any of my future uploads.